This is probably going to be longer than my usual talk, like my old one. So this is system complexities with subscriptions and contracts. It's really about subscription services and contracts. Those could be service agreements. They can be insurance. I've been involved in home loans and insurance a couple times, other kind of financial agreements. And really the problem is we have this kind of balancing of customer desires, our financial fiduciary responsibility. We may have physical restrictions. A lot of companies have it kind of pretty straightforward. Everything's e-pay or electronic, and you sort of get this instant transaction. But if you're in a large dollar where there's paper, where there's a actual contract, you can end up in a situation where the person or the notice may go out a month in advance. And so you actually end up having to create a subscription entity or entry for the month that's, or the period that's upcoming, based on the fact that you have to give somebody a copy of that contract. Regulatory requirements are also something that come into play, and they can make this kind of complicated. So for subscriptions, I'm talking something simple as a streaming service, underwear service, financial instrument of some type, or auto renewing. This is all about auto renewing, not single, or insurance, right? So let's go and look at the simplest, my favorite one of the bunch, and that is prepay with renewal, right? See, simple prepay and changes it's auto renewed, and basically this is low enough dollar. You buy the product, you use it, you get into a renewal period, you pay again, and you can cancel at any time because there's no contractual obligation, but any cancellation actually happens at the beginning of the next pay period at the end of this period, right? So there's no early cancellation with partial refund. I envy the streaming services and other people that are able to do this. This is really straightforward stuff here. The next one is kind of a version of that. This is a case where you actually have something that's more complicated. I ran into this when I dropped a watch from a cell plan. I had signed up for a service. It had a start date. We're going to use removal date 2 here just so I can talk through it. Ended up in a renewal date. We had this watch on the cell plan for a couple months, and we decided we wanted to remove it. And they were like, sure. But what actually happened is they couldn't actually remove the watch from the contract because they weren't going to prorate $5. And also because of the way it got added to the plan, it wasn't like a regular phone device. They always ended it on the end date, right? At renewal period, this last date, they would actually drop it. So in a lot of ways, this is sort of a version of the streaming service, right? The payment and service date's always aligned, and the contract changes only happen at renewal. So there was no inter-period change here on this one. All right, I picked this one. So this one's sort of interesting. In this case, we have fairly expensive contracts where people are not going to want to cancel a contract and walk away from some money. So in a lot of cases, this might be an insurance change. It could be any kind of service contract that's large, medium dollar. Well, it depends on your budget, I guess, to some people. Anyway, so what happens here is we actually make changes immediately. We sign up to a service, you go through some usage period, you go through a billing period, and you have some effective date you've requested a change that's like in the middle of a term or in the middle of a contract period. What we do is we just term the contract you're in, create a new contract with the changes on it, and let that run out, right? And so we give you a partial refund on the contract that you had before, you get a new one. What is the downside of this? Well, the upside of this is really straightforward, right? No weird having to do, I'll show you why this could be, they see these two guys overlap, right? The second one actually got created, like if this was a renewal one, well, actually you can end up with a third one. So it's just bad. This is kind of cool. You only ever have one thing going at a time. You always know when you started a new one. What are the downsides of this? Customers may not want to start a new contract in the middle of another one. It may change their payment dates. And if you don't fix that, then you got to do this kind of prepay, kind of like a true up, right? Oh, you want your old date. Well, then you got to pay. We'll give you a refund, and then we're going to charge you a partial month or partial period, and then you'll be on the pay date you wanted, right? But this one, so you get some complexity when users want the same dates for with the changes that they had before. The other thing is contract terms could be different. You can have legal or regulatory issues, or it could be you don't write that contract anymore. I had a 5-year contract for some service, and the company got bought, and they would love for me to break my contract because then they can charge me the new terms with the price increases. and they get to use put all my posts into their AI, which who would want to do that? Anyway, so the idea here, though, is there are some downsides to customers in here. It's pretty straightforward, and you could argue that any change calls for a new contract, right? I'm trying to think of some examples of this. Anyway, happens in insurance. And also I've seen it, refi, right? Oh, I want to refi. That's actually taking out a new loan. It's kind of a version of this, right? If you want to change your interest rate. Not really exactly the same, but I'm trying to pick an analogy that works for people. Okay, so this one is pretty straightforward, right? It's basically a sale. We ended the other contract early and we created a sale of a new product. So this one is kind of complex, and then I'm going to do a more complex version of this in a second. So here, we didn't change the contract dates. The payment dates don't change. It's basically what I talked about in the previous one. They request a rate affecting change, a cost affecting change somewhere in the pay period. What do? We actually amend the contract that they've got if we can. And what I said here is we did this before payment. Why did I say that? Because we don't have like a prepay problem, right? So if you're in the middle of something, and I'll show you this in a minute, and the second bill's outstanding, right? That means we actually have two contracts, the one that's in place and the one that's coming. And so that's unfortunate, right? Because now we got to adjust both of them, and I'll show you that in a minute. But in this case, before anything would be impacted, no money's changed hand. They wanted to make a change. We're kind of in the streaming mode where we can do all this online. The bill changes on the website. We just have you to pay the new amount. You're good to go, and nothing changes, right? This is actually pretty good. No refunds or prorating are really required. Actually, a little prorating will get done. I don't know why I put that there. And part of the issue here is the second half where you do this modification, you're actually going to be cutting a contract change, and the terms in the previous contract may no longer be valid. And so the question is, how do you convince your system to allow you to use previous terms? Because like insurance, you see this with coverages that might be covered in a regulatory way. Hey, that coverage doesn't exist anymore that you have. Actually, you see this with internet plans and stuff, right? The one plan doesn't exist anymore. So as soon as you make a change, we're going to try and put you on the new contract, or the system may support certain minimums, a certain subset of changes. And that means the system, as of today, if you got a new contract, you'd get the new terms. But if you have an old contract that we're amending, we might let you keep the terms. So this is actually pretty complicated because now you got to be able to do terms in a contract based on when the original contract was, not right now. And that's very different from the one I just showed you. The next one here is contract changes on renewal. This is actually a kind of a version of the one two back. This is pretty complicated, actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm in a contract period, and insurance is a good example. I'm in some insurance example, but it doesn't have to be insurance. And somewhere partially through the contract, we decided to make a change, right? I had a kid. I bought a car. I got a new refrigerator. No, that wouldn't be one. Well, anyway, I got dog health insurance. I don't know. So what happens is now we're in a situation, though, where the change was made where the new contract was already ready. So I got like a 3-year contract. The new contract's already been cut. It's in our system. It's going to go in effective on the end date of this first one. And now we've decided to make a change to the first one. That actually means we need to make a change to both of them, right? Because we're going to try and keep them in the current contract because we don't want to move the dates, and we need to keep the contract terms, right? This one we did a couple back where you started a new contract would be a good one. But if we don't do that here because people, because of the way the system's set up, then this becomes, I actually end up needing to amend both of these, right? I need to change both of these. I changed the one you're in, and the one I sent you the bill for is no longer valid, right? I sent it out 30 days in advance so you could review it. It's not valid anymore because you made changes on the current. We wouldn't be transitioning back into the previous plan. So now we actually need to amend the new contract, void the one we sent out, and send you a new one. So new contracts in this case were issued prior to the completion of the old one. This makes sense. We don't have that problem in streaming because essentially you're billed and charged on the same day. But if we have a paper or a contract that somebody needs to be able to review, we have some window in there where they overlap. And so any change you make, if it's far enough in the future, it would only impact the new contract. But if it was in before the new contract came into effect, I actually need to adjust both of them, right? Because it would probably change the cost and everything of that. So if we look at this, right, identifying and managing necessary and incidental and regulatory complexity. Man, I got all the big words in. Basically, everything adds complexity, right? So if you can just never cancel anything and in the middle and not have to do any prorating and cancel at the end of a term, man, you're good. But if you have legacy processes, they add complexity. If you need to support paper billing and posting of checks or anything else, that adds complexity because now you've got time window overlap. Arbitrary effective date changes add complexity. If you're going to let somebody change the contract in the middle without a cancellation. Across contract periods adds complexity. So you can have an effective date that actually puts you into two different contracts, right? The one that's pending and the one that's current. Any change after payment causes billing complexity, right? If we can make a change prior to payment, then we don't have to worry about it, right? But if we make a change after payment, we may end up with a refund. We may need more money. We may eat it just to make it simple. Intra-period changes prior to payment add complexity. If the money's out, is that one right? Anyway, that doesn't matter. So those are the big ones for complexity. So basically anything you do beyond like the super basic cancel at the end of the term, you got to start and sit and think through how would you automate this? How does the system keep track? How do you fall within regulatory guidelines that you don't end up breaking a contract or violating a law of sub-regulatory agency? So that's what I got. Regulations and historical payment methods and business model create system complexity around subscriptions and contracts. Have a less than complex day.